Hello, Miss Sophia. It's your coach, Mike. Technology's pretty cool, isn't it? All right, I made you a little video here, which is just a basic primer of how to play the new opening. Again, remember with the white pieces, you do your normal London system with black. All we're trying to do is get you out of the opening and into a position where you kind of know some ideas, which can only help you, right? You're just totally going to JPC this position. So anyway, let's just take a look at some basic ideas. So we talked about E4 already, right? So your main idea after E4 is you're going to play the move D6 to start. And then on D4, which is the most common move, you play the move E5, right? After E5, you have to expect them to take, thinking that your queen is going to get captured and your king is stuck in the middle. But remember, we don't mind this so much. Just remember the basic ideas. And if you see anything, and trust me, you're going to see so many things you've never seen before, just try to figure out where you want to put your king, which bishop you want to trade. Like most of the time, we want to trade off this dark squared bishop here because a lot of our pawns will be in the middle with dark squares. So if we can trade this, we would be happy. So for example, if knight f3, do you remember how to guard this pawn from the game I showed you? Pawn f6 and knight c3, let's say. You want to remember this move pawn c6, which not only guards the d5 square, but it also gives your king this square here on c7 in case he gets checked on this line. So maybe bishop c4. Don't worry about the trade of the bishop for this knight because you have a rook here. And then you can set up for trading off this bishop. And hopefully you'll remember this idea. Knight to d7. Look, sometimes you can bring this bishop out first if you want. It's really up to you. But this knight d7 move is to trade this off quickly if possible. So let's say, I don't know, white castles. You can play a waiting move like king c7. You can figure out where these guys will go. What about bishop e3? What do you think you would do here? Well, that's right. You would be able to trade off your bishop. And if they take and you take, one of the ideas from the game that I showed you is if they do bother your knight, always look to see if you have this move bishop e6, which gets a piece out, and you don't have to retreat the knight. If you have to retreat the knight, you retreat the knight. If you don't, you can play bishop e6, and if takes, this is pretty much the same position from the game that I had. You might play b5 someday, knight here. Always remember to not allow them to double rooks comfortably. You trade one pair of rooks if possible. Okay, so let's go back a little bit just to throw some ideas at you so you have this, and you can watch this video at Nationals. So e4, we're going to play the move d6, d4, e5. Okay, what about here if they don't trade queens and they play, oops, sorry, wrong opening. 1 minute, my dear. Here, so you play your move e5 hoping to trade queens. If they say no with knight f3, just remember the setup. Take the pawn, and they have two ways to take back, with the knight or the queen. If they take with the knight, try to remember our setup. We play bishop e7 just to stall for a move to see what they do with this guy. Knight c3, then knight f6. You don't have to play pawn c6 to keep this knight out. The queens are still on the board. This is a different opening now, right? Like a move like bishop c4, you can castle. And let's say they castle. Here's a cool idea. Remember this knight c6 idea? If they take, we take with our b pawn, and you'll have an open file to work with. These pawns are guarding important squares in the middle. You can bring your bishop out at some point. Sometimes you can even bring it here and challenge this bishop. If they take, you take back. And you'll notice I'm using the word sometimes. You do whatever you want, as long as you know the basic idea of where your pieces go, okay? So let me show you some other things. Let's go back here. So remember when they played knight f3, they didn't want to trade queens? We're going to take. They can also take with your queen, with their queen. And when they do, they're attacking this pawn. So if you bring your bishop out right away, you're going to lose a pawn. So don't. Just attack their queen. The better players are not going to move their queen. If they move their queen, you win a tempo. Then just bring your pieces out. If they pin your knight, then you simply break the pin, and that'll force the queen to move or force them to give you their light squared bishop. Say they castle. I don't know, what would you do here? Practice. Not bishop e7 again. Maybe you don't want to lose that pawn, so play knight f6. Knight c3, bishop e7. Same exact structure. Castle the king. Later in the game you might try to break, but you have a couple of bishops to work with, and you know, just play chess. I think you're going to do really well with this opening once you learn some of the basic ideas, and you can just experiment yourself. Let's go back. What if they open with d4? Same idea. d6 on move 1. You're going to play d6 no matter what white does on move 1. If c4, there's the pawn duo. That's right, e5. And again, we're looking to trade queens. If pawn takes, we take, queen takes, king takes, knight f3, pawn f6, knight c3. Now the queens are off the board. This is a different opening now. Remember where your king goes when the queens come off? Because it looks like it's bad. It's really not. Play the move c6. And you pretty much have the same ideas. If they play here at the queen pawn, it's a little easier for us because they have a problem what to do with this guy here on e2. Because if they move it one box, they lock the bishop in. If they go 2, which is one of the main lines, after e4, you see the d4 square? That's really weak, and later in the game you might be able to sink a knight on that square. But if you're not sure what to do, always remember when the queens come off and you have this pawn structure, this is your bad bishop. We want to trade it. And the trick is you put the knight on d7. And again, if you want to bring this bishop out first, you can. But I like getting this bishop off the board. Bishop e3, and what's the move? Bishop c5. They take, you take. They can castle with a check. Looks scary, right? Where does your king go? King c7. If they kick your knight, what would you do? On d7 or e6? I'd put it on e6. Why not? You've got your eye on this square. This bishop might be a little quiet for a while, but you bring this knight out, challenge them with one rook, trade one rook off the board, and little by little these pieces will come out. You got to maneuver them, so use your head, you know. Knight on e6. Keep this pawn on c6 for a while. Do you remember? Cover that d5 square. Don't let the bad guys in. And eventually you'll put something on d4. I'm really not worried about it. Let's say a kid plays c4 on move 1. All right, d6. If they play d4, that's a position we know. If they do something else like g3 to fianchetto, put a pawn on e5. Bishop g2, bishop e7. Just watch this bishop. You don't want to lose your rook, right? Knight c3, I don't know. You tell me. How about knight f6? Knight f3, castle, JPC, your tail off, okay? So listen, go over the video. Don't worry if you miss a move here and there, because your openings with black, you were kind of all over the place anyway. So before you know it, you're going to be solidly over 1,200, and then we'll start working on your openings. And I got to 2,000 playing this opening, so don't think it's bad at all. It's not. And with white, don't change a thing, okay? All right, sounds good. Oh, one other line. Let me show you real quick. Let's say we got to this kind of position, which comes from here. Watch. e4, d6, d4. You should guess the moves by now. e5, pawn takes, queen takes, king takes, knight f3, pawn f6, knight c3. What do we do? c6, bishop c4, knight d7, castle, king c7, bishop e3. If we can, we're going to challenge that bishop. Bishop takes, knight takes, and b4 is when we play bishop e6, right? Okay, I have a question. What if they don't play that move and they let our knight stay on c5? Do you remember the move that supports the knight? It's a5, and that stops them from playing b4 so quickly. And if they try to double, we just have to get the pieces out and be able to eventually challenge them with a rook here. So, for example, knight e7, rook f to d1, We can't challenge yet because you'll lose a rook. So we need to move this bishop. So why not bishop g4? If they attacked you, trade off the bishop. And you've got a nice square here on f4. See this maneuver? Knight here, knight here. You bring one rook here, trade another rook off. You could play b5, chase these pieces around, and have some fun in the end game, okay? So listen, go over the video. Don't sweat it. Learn the basic ideas and have some fun tomorrow, okay? All right, I'll see you soon.